Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. If you're new here, a special welcome to you. I'm Lindy. I read a lot, pretty much a book a day, although I'm getting less reading in these days because my sweetie and I are preparing to move. We're leaving Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where we live, after many decades here. And we're moving to Victoria, British Columbia. We have found this gorgeous little house to rent. We're looking forward to living there, but it's going to be hard to leave here. Getting lots of visiting in these days, saying goodbye to people and so on. I made another cake recently from You Are Human and You Need Cake by Julie Van Rosenthal. I used the lunar rhubarb cake recipe, but altered it to include, in addition to rhubarb, I put in sour cherries and raspberries, all three from my garden. And it turned out well. I really trust the recipes in this cookbook. So, speaking of good food, this past week was our monthly literary salon that we hold with friends, and there is always a great feast spread out for that. We all bring pieces to read, either that we've written ourselves or something that we want to share with the group. The piece that I chose is from Wonder World, which I'm going to be talking about later in this video when I get to the 7 books that I finished in the past week. And it was also my Feminist book club this past week. We discuss over Zoom, and so I will continue to be able to participate even after we move. And the book that we talked about is really good, actually, and I'll be telling you more about that later on in this video. In other bookish news, the Booker Longlist came out, and I've only read one book on that list, Jonathan Escoffery's If I Survive You, which I thought was decent. A little surprised that it made the Booker list, but I like interconnected short stories, and that's what that is. And I own one of the books on the long list that I haven't read yet, Western Lane by Chetna Maroo. This was a gift to me from Sean the Book Maniac, so thank you, Sean, for that. I will be getting to this soon. And there's one other book on that list that I paid particular attention to, and that is because it's by a Canadian author, Sarah Bernstein. Well, she was born in Canada. She lives in Scotland now, and her second novel is called Study for Obedience. It is on the Craving Can Lit list. I will link that list below because that is the list that I'm paying the most attention to. I am shadowing the Giller, special project that I've been doing for a few years along with some other readers, where we try and come up with our own Giller Prize winner. That's Canada's premier fiction award. So that's what I'm concentrating on reading. I will give Sarah Bernstein's book a look because it is eligible. And the other big news this week, I think it was just this past week, the Eisner Awards were announced. I was really pleased to see that Kate Beaton won 2 awards. She got Best Graphic Memoir for Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands. Fantastic memoir. And she also got Best Writer/Artist. Awards lists like this are a great way for me to find out about books that I want to read or at least have a look at. And I found 3 graphic novels in my library's Hoopla collection that all received awards this year, including The Night Eaters by Marjorie Liu and Sana Tanaka. It won Best Graphic Album. And Shelley Tanaka also got an award for Best Painter / Multimedia Artist. You might be familiar with these two because they also have done the Monstrous graphic novel series together. And then the other two that I have checked out from Hoopla are an autobiography. It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth by Zoe Thorogood, which won the Russ Manning Promising Newcomer Award, and a biography of Patricia Highsmith, Flung Out of Space by Hannah Templar. I don't know if Anne Novella and Ollie from Criminali are familiar with this work, but they are well on their way through a year-long project of reading all of the oeuvre of Patricia Highsmith. So this might be of interest to them or any of you who are curious about the author Patricia Highsmith. And this is Frida. Hello. And I've got Joni on my lap. Uh-oh. Let's see what happens here. A surprise on that Eisner Award list was Richard Stark's Parker the Martini edition. And my first reaction was to be startled because the artist Darwin Cook, who had been adapting Richard Stark's Parker crime detective novels, died in 2016 of cancer. He was quite young. He was in his early 50s. But when I looked into it further, I saw I could purchase this for about $130. It's an oversized slipcase edition with collected works that pairs up with an earlier fancy edition like that. In addition to 2 stories, it has additional material that wasn't published elsewhere. The award that it got was Best Graphic Album Reprint. There's a very long list of categories for the Eisners. I will link the full list below if you're interested. A couple of books on that list that I have talked about on this channel before are Frizzy by Claribel Ortega and Rose Busamra, and also Chivalry by Neil Gaiman, which was adapted by Colleen Doran. So in addition to the Eisner Awards, if you're wondering how to keep up with new graphic novels and comics, what I do, I've been following the PW Comics World More to Come podcast for many years, and I also subscribe to Publishers Weekly The Fanatic, which is an email newsletter. So those are possibilities if you want more information on what's what in new comics. So there is a readathon going on right now on BookTube, the Women's World Cup readathon, and you don't have to follow soccer to participate. I don't follow soccer, but I signed up. I got assigned the country Italy, read a couple of graphic novels by Italian authors, and now Italy lost to Sweden. And so, as I mentioned last week, I was going to read something by a Swedish author. I chose Selma Lagerlöf, and I read The Girl from the Marsh Croft because it was available free via Library Archive. It came out around 1909. The English translation in 1911 is by Velma Swanston Howard. And I liked it all right. It's very much a romance novel, not really my thing. And it also is quite moralistic. But I'm glad that I read it. I was especially interested to find out more about Selma Lagerlöf. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize for Literature and also the first Swedish writer to win that prize. So pretty special. So I See, there's stamps and coins commemorating her. Now, I read a book by her. And by reading it, I'm also participating in Women in Translation Month, which is August. The next game that Sweden plays, so now I'm on Team Sweden. And if Sweden loses, then I will be on to whoever wins against Sweden. Well, their next game is Sunday, and they're playing the USA. I know that the American team is very strong, so that is going to be really easy for me to choose something by an American writer. But I'm kind of hoping to stick with women in translation, so who knows? One thing I want to mention about the dangers of reading books that are scanned onto the internet. This particular copy was done pretty sloppily, so there were some pages where I had to just guess at what the words were. I'll show you what it looked like in here. Next up is an audiobook by another Nobel Prize winner, Abdulrazak Gurnah. The book that I read was published way back in 1994. It's called Paradise. But the audio edition just came out this year. It's read by Chukwudi Iwuji. Really good to hear an African voice, because this book is set in historical East Africa during the early period of colonial incursion by the Europeans, the building of a railroad by the Germans, and it's a coming-of-age story that starts with a boy who's 12 years old, and we follow a few years of his life. As I said, starting from when he was 12, when his father sold him into indentured servitude to a merchant. So all these changes that are happening around him are seen through his eyes. I like character-based fiction like this, and the really strong setting. Yeah, 5 stars, easy. Now the next 5 books that I'm going to be telling you about are all by Canadian authors, including the first 2 are by queer Canadian authors. So, represent. This is the book we read for my Feminist book club. Really good, actually, by Monica Heisey. Heisey now lives in the UK, as far as I know. She's a comedy writer, and that comes through so strongly in this book, which is kind of like a long comedy sketch. Maggie is 29, and she and her husband have separated. They're going through divorce, and she is in denial, totally in denial, telling everybody, I'm fine, it's fine. And of course, she's not. She is falling apart. It's kind of frustrating to read about her making one mistake after another, alienating her friends. Of course, comes out all right in the end. She does grow and learn about herself, but it seems to take forever. I learned a lot of contemporary slang. I had to ask my friends in the Feminist book club, all of whom are much younger than I am, or things like thirst trap, California sober, glow up, stuff like that. It's not a book that's likely to age well. It's very much of the moment. A fun read, although, as I said, I found myself getting quite impatient with her, and some parts I skimmed a bit. If you're in the mood for something to really make you laugh, with a little bit of heartbreak in there. So it's kind of along the lines of Bridget Jones's Diary, really. Yeah. And by the way, Fraser Simons of Springboard Thought asked me about these flags that I put in here and if I reuse them, and yes indeed I do. And the way that I reuse them is when I pull them off, I stick them onto a bookmark and use that bookmark in a book and just keep pulling the flags off as I need them until they don't stick anymore. So I can reuse them lots of times. And what I'm doing with these flagged passages, sometimes it's for a book club, like the one that I just showed you, and those are passages that I want to talk about, or purely for my own use. When I finish a book, I can go back and reread those flagged passages. Sometimes it's something I want to investigate more about, or just so that I'll be able to talk about it better here on my channel. That's what the flags are about. And you see there's a bunch in this next one as well, Wonderworld by K.R. Bigden. Forgot to mention that Maggie in this book is bisexual, which is something that does come up once she divorces and starts to swipe right on every person on her Tinder app. All right, on to Wonderworld. So there's a lot of similarities between these two books, actually, and not just that they're both queer. Isaac Funk is Mennonite. He was kicked out of his church when he was in high school because he was kissing a boy. So he went to Halifax for university. He was there for 10 years, no contact with his family. And at the start, he gets a call from his father in this little tiny Manitoba town, Mennonite town, that his grandfather has died and left him a game farm property, Wonderworld, although it's been closed for a number of years. So, queer person, in this case Isaac, is pansexual, goes back to his hometown and confronts what he left behind. This is really quite a heartwarming story because it shows that there is a place for queer people in small towns. A feel-good kind of ending. And also, it is very funny in a slapstick almost kind of way. That it's, again, like comedy writing, which is how I would describe really good, actually. Just by chance that I picked up 2 in a row like that. Isaac's uncle is the mayor of this little town, and he is very conservative. Here's a passage that gives you an idea of the writing style. It's colder than a morgue inside the town office. Despite their cardigans and floor-length skirts, Jake's employees shiver at their desks. There's a lock on the thermostat, and I'm sure I know who holds the key. The mayor walks me past a long line of filing cabinets and a community bulletin board overflowing with ads for tractor parts, church fundraisers, and free zucchini. Next up is a graphic novel from Quebec, a memoir. My Body in Pieces by Marie-Noëlle Hébert, translation Shelley Tanaka. So my friend Amy read it, and she messaged me to ask if I had read it, and I hadn't. So she said, if you want to read it, let's discuss it. So that's what we did. And I was able to get both the French and the English editions from my local library. So it was kind of fun to compare the two. There are a few examples where we were able to look at how the Groundwood English edition is by Groundwood, House of Anansi, and how they maybe made some editorial decisions about where the text is on the page and how the text is presented, and in some cases lightened or darkened the images, which is all done in graphite pencil. Beautiful, beautiful artwork. The memoir is about Marie-Noëlle's relationship to her body and disordered eating and looking back on her childhood, and it goes up into her early 20s. I'll just talk about one section in particular. On some pages, Marie-Noëlle shows herself in her, it looks like a school picture, her younger years, with her journal writing. And in the French edition, it is in longhand. And in the English edition, it's printed and looks very much like it might be a younger person writing. And then on the facing page, where we see a scene that Marie-Noëlle comes up to her mother and says, "I'd like to go shopping sometime. My clothes are a bit tight." "Why aren't you listening to me? It's like you don't give a shit about me." And her mother says, in the English edition, "Pretty is as pretty does," which seems to be almost a non sequitur here. But the French edition, it's a different adage, "Sois poli si tu n'es pas jolie," which is saying, if you're not good looking, then you need to at least be polite. So the nuance is quite different, I think, between those two. Overall, this is a book that both Amy and I highly recommend. The English edition, My Body in Pieces, and the French edition, La Grosse Laide. Next up, nonfiction in audiobook format, 8 Bears, Mythic Past and Imperiled Future by Gloria Dickie, who's a Canadian journalist. I like this okay, but I only gave it 3 stars because of the writing. It's just not to my taste. It's a combination of the natural history of 8 species of bears that we currently have on the planet, and the connection that people have with them. So the culture and history of humans interacting with bears. Gloria Dickie did travel to various parts of the world, China and India and Peru, I think, as well as Churchill, Manitoba, to see bear species. There's the brown bear, and the 2 subspecies are the grizzly bear and the Kodiak bear. There's the American black bear, which can be brown in color as well as black. There's the giant panda, the polar bear, the Asiatic black bear, also called the moon bear. There's the sun bear, the sloth bear, and the spectacled bear. There are a couple of chapters where there are pretty gruesome descriptions of things people have done and continue to do to bears. Sun bears and moon bears being kept on farms to extract bile that's sold for medicinal purposes. Horrible, horrendous, heartbreaking. Stay away if you don't want to read about animal cruelty. And then also in India, the sloth bears who were trained as to be entertainment, dancing bears, and again, animal cruelty. So there is a sloth bear sanctuary, and in this passage, Gloria Dickie was visiting this sanctuary. Suddenly, 3 bears appeared to my right. Their shaggy heads were bowed as they snorted along the fence line, breathing deeply. Frothy saliva pooled around the corners of their mouths. They had picked up our scent. Roshin, Arun and Varun, all in their mid-teens, had been surrendered to Wildlife SOS more than a decade ago. The usually solitary bears had since formed a close companionship to process their collective trauma. So this anthropomorphizing of the bears and saying they're processing their trauma kind of rubs me the wrong way. And another sentence that really struck me as over the top is, without bears, the woods and our stories would be empty. I appreciate bears, I think, as much as the next person, but I think it's a little much to say that our woods would be empty and our stories would be empty without bears. Still, I did learn a lot of interesting facts about bears, so I'm glad I read it. And last up, the best book that I've read in the past week, Ian Williams' Reproduction. I did a buddy read of this with Jolene of Bookworm Adventure Girl. Wow, it was so much fun. It is a wild ride, very strange, and so exciting. The writing is in a style that's somewhat challenging, which I like. I like to be solving puzzles. And it's the story about family, biological family and found family, made family, how families come about, just done with so much heart and humor, lots of humor in here. I loved it to bits. In the first section, we meet Edgar and Felicia in a hospital in Toronto. Their mothers are in the same room. They're both dying, and Edgar is white and from a rich German family. Felicia is black. She's a student from an unnamed Caribbean country. This starts off a whole series starting in the late 70s and up to present day. Here's a section of Edgar later on in the book. Drunkard. That was Felicia's word. The drinking didn't seem to bother her as much, though. If he asked her to pick one, I either give up drinking or smoking, she'd pick smoking, which would be the greater sacrifice, as he was not what people would call a big drinker. He was a social drinker who drank only on special occasions, which he usually celebrated alone. In the last section of this book, cancer has a voice or a presence, and it's shown with super and subscript in between the rest of the text. And there is a video online of Ian Williams talking about that particular aspect and how he put this book together, how to read the book. I will include a link down below in case you're interested. I know there are readers who think that you should be able to get everything you need without an author explaining something. And I think you can do that from this book, but it's those extra things that make second and third and fourth readings of a novel even more rich as you work out, what are these X's about? And what is the XY about? And more X's and multiple X's. Multiplication, reproduction. As I said, it's not just clever, it is a book with so much heart. And I really, really appreciate that. And obviously the Giller judges in 2019 also really appreciated it because it won the Giller Prize that year. So that is all I've got to tell you about today. Thank you so much, you beautiful people, for watching my channel, for continuing to interact with me in the comments. I really love it when you say hello and let me know that you're there and watching. I really appreciate that. I'm going to leave you with a short video of the bumblebees in my garden. The globe thistle is blooming and the bees adore it. Bye for now.